Morning, good afternoon, good evening. The other day, I was talking about George Santayana and what he said that those who do not learn from the past are destined to repeat the same mistake over and over again. Zimbabwe is a failed state. And one of the contributory factors to that is that we never seem to learn from our previous mistakes. I've said it on this platform, and I'll say it again. One of the reasons why Zimbabwe is a failed state is that we failed to hold free, fair, and credible elections. Zanu PF, after independence in 1980, decided that they were not going to take the risk of holding free and fair elections and risk losing power. So the 1980 elections were held under the cloud of Zanu PF's campaign was very clear. If the party did not win the election, the Bush War would continue. The ordinary people in Zimbabwe, particularly those in the rural areas, had suffered greatly throughout the war of liberation. And they were desperate to end that war. And so there's no doubt that people voted to end the war. And there are some people who have argued that no, Zanu PF was, yes, they sent out that message, but it was only politicking. They didn't mean it. Well, that illusion was lifted just 3 years down the line, in 1983, when Zanu PF launched its Kukurahundi. History will make it very clear that Gukurahundi was nothing more than Zanu PF trying to ensure that they retained power. That was the primary purpose of Gukurahundi. They were trying to coerce the late Joshua Nkomo and his ZAPU guys to give up ZAPU as a political entity and force them to join Zanu PF. And they got their wish in 1987 when ZAPU signed the Unity Accord. That cleared the way for Mugabe to impose a de facto one-party state. Ever since the signing of the de facto one-party, the Unity Accord, Zimbabwe was operating as a de facto one-party state. That gave Zanu PF the license to rig elections to make sure that Zanu PF stayed in power at all costs. It was to take another 10 years from hence for the people to wake up to the reality that Zimbabwe was a de facto one-party state. And as long as Zanu PF had this carte blanche powers to rig elections, they will never remove the regime from office. As long as the regime remained in office, the economic meltdown, which had already started, would continue. And so by the turn of the century, people realized that the only way they're going to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections is if we can implement democratic changes that will force the regime to hold free, fair, and credible elections. And so the ordinary people were risking life, livelihoods, limbs to vote the opposition into office so that they could implement reforms. The opposition did have the opportunity to implement those reforms, none more so than during the 2008 to 2013 GNU. Why it has been so difficult for people to get their heads around that beggars belief. I can understand my aunt and my nephew in the rural backwaters not understanding it. But why the intellectuals, professionals, people with university degrees have failed to understand that beggars belief. People should understand that the 2008 to 2013, the primary purpose of that was to implement the reforms. Morgan Tsvangirai and company failed to implement even one token reform during that 5-year period because Mugabe bribed them. This, what I find so difficult is that this has been, even the Zanu PF cronies themselves boasted about it. If you ask them during the GNU, why is the MDC not implementing reforms? They boasted. Mazwana MDC adziza kusvika anyerere. MDC leaders have learned to enjoy the gravy train, the benefits of the gravy train. They will never rock the boat. And that is exactly what happened. Leaders like Tendai BT, David Coulthard, have over the years confirmed that same thing. I have shown on this platform a quotation from Tendai BT in 2015, where he was admitting that we can't keep on participating in these flawed elections because they're so flawed. Zanu PF is guaranteed to win. What he was talking about there is this is post GNU. Post GNU, MDC leaders were participating in flawed elections, knowing fully well that they're flawed, knowing fully well that participating will give Zanu PF legitimacy, but they continued doing so out of greed. David Coulthard admitted the last point clearly, the issue of participating to give Zanu PF legitimacy. This is a quotation from his book. Why is it that the Zimbabwe so-called intellectuals have failed to understand this simple political reality? Beggars belief. Last year, 2023, Nelson Chamisa and company participated in those elections, knowing fully well that the process was flawed, knowing fully well that participating will give Zanu PF legitimacy. But such was their determination to participate that Nelson Chamisa even was coming up with completely outrageous statements like, oh, I've plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. Triple C is going to win big. God is in it, he said. Of course, he was lying. Anyone who has got half a brain could see that those elections, the process was so flawed, there was no way Triple C was going to win those elections. But ZEC had failed to produce something as basic as a verified voters roll. Zanu PF was boasting of how they were frog marching people, particularly in the rural areas, to go and vote for Zanu PF. And yet Chamisa maintained that position. Triple C is going to win big. We have plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. God is in it. Of course, when the results came, Zanu PF won the parliamentary seats and the presidency. Funny enough, none of the Triple C supporters have ever come out to say to Chamisa, so what happened? Can you account for what happened here? You were supposed to win big. What happened? None. In fact, since the results came out of last year's election, Triple C has imploded. And Chamisa himself has had to resign from the party he had formed in a huff, complaining that Zanu PF had infiltrated it and it was impossible for him to continue. He only saw it after the elections, after he'd given Zanu PF legitimacy. That's strange. All along, he didn't see it. And he has since been talking of forming another party. And this is him giving his comment on the progress he's making. This was him on the former tweet handle, X, boasting. Congratulations, we are now a 1.3 million strong. And it's organic. Thank you, family, for your endless, enduring support. You are the wind in my sail. You are special. All glory to hashtag God is in it. Can't believe it. People are supporting Chamisa when here is the MDC Triple C leaders who have failed to implement even one meaningful reform to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections, including in the last 23 years, including the 5 during the GNU. And nobody has seen it. Last year, he was the one who was warned, you cannot keep on participating, giving Zanu PF legitimacy. He lied and said he had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. And without even saying, well, please explain what happened last year. The people are going back and supporting him blindly. Nations get the government they deserve. We cannot pretend that we are not getting the government we deserve. I honestly believe that Zimbabweans, until we open our eyes, we are not getting out of this hell. And it is a pity. It really is a pity that we never seem to learn from the past. The primary purpose of the GNU was to implement the democratic reforms to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. For 23 years, including the 5 in the GNU, MDC CCC leaders have failed to implement even one reform. Not even one reform. And they've been participating in flawed elections to give Zanu PF legitimacy. That is not rocket science. That is the political reality. And we are refusing to read that political reality at our own peril. Zanu PF is quite happy with Chamisa and company. They are the ones who have helped to give Zanu PF legitimacy. First of all, to retain all the carte blanche dictatorial powers to rig elections. Then when they've rigged them, they've continued to faithfully participate to give the process legitimacy. That is the political reality. And we are heading for exactly that in 2028, reading what Chamisa is saying here. It is unbelievable. We have it in our own power to end this Zanu PF dictatorship. All we have got to do is make sure we implement the democratic reforms to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. What Zanu PF has done here is keep the party that we had sent out to carry out that task. They bribed them, and they've been continuing under the pretext that they are still fighting in our corner, Provo's corner, when in reality, they are now fighting in Zanu PF's corner. And we do not have the intellect to see that there is something desperately wrong here. If MDC CCC have failed to implement even one meaningful reform in 23 years, well, surely it makes sense to say, well, let's find somebody else who would. But somehow, we are finding it impossible to make that quantum leap, to make that decision and saying, well, let's find somebody else. Sounds logical, but clearly, to some people, it is mission impossible. The bottom line is, until we learn, we'll be stuck with this regime. I'll just finish tonight's discussion with this cartoon. I found it really interesting. Somehow, in many ways, it's actually emphasizes the problems in Zimbabwe. This is a cartoon of a story that happened the other day. We discussed it on this. The president there would be Emerson Mnangagwa. And the lady he is smoking with his scarf is his niece. In the article earlier this week, there was an article that she had been arrested by the police for swindling 1.5 million US dollars from some Indians who wanted to buy mines in Zimbabwe. And the president is asking his Zanu PF friends there to hold her down. And while he smacks her. And in this particular case, like I said, smacking her with his scarf. And this is supposed to be the citizen shouting, use this, a proper heavy stick to smack him. How could he use a heavy stick to smack him when he himself is heavily involved in the looting that is completely destroyed Zimbabwe? What I find interesting in this is that many people, many Zimbabweans out there would have laughed their heads off when they saw this cartoon. The truth of the matter is actually, this is a sick joke. And they are laughing at themselves. Because the real victims of all this looting in Zimbabwe is the citizens. Zimbabwe is a failed state. The economy is in such a mess that 90% of the people are unemployed. Our basic infrastructure, roads, hospitals, schools, they are in varying degrees of decay and rot after decades of neglect, underfunded. The other day, we were talking here of how the regime was offering 10 US dollars salary increment to the teachers when inflation is sitting at 1,600% plus. This is the reality. All those who saw this and found it to be funny and were laughing. The truth of the matter is, this is a sick joke. And we, the ordinary people, are the ones who are paying dearly for it. Corruption in Zimbabwe has reached the proportion now where Zanu PF ruling elite are incredibly rich. And the gap between the rich and the poor has opened up a chasm. And so the opposition, or whatever it is now, Chamisa and company, when he complained that Zanu PF had infiltrated his party, Triple C, there was some truth in that. This is a party that has got so much wealth that they're able to bribe the members of the opposition to the point where they do what Zanu PF want them to do. One manifestation of that bribe was that this is why the opposition leaders were adamant they were going to participate in the elections no matter what, no matter how flawed the process got. They were absolutely determined because they knew that the few who gets onto the gravy train, they're fine. Many of the opposition leaders have actually, once they've fallen out with their colleagues in the opposition, have shamelessly moved over to join Zanu PF, showing the influence of Zanu PF. Chamisa can boast about his new movement, but I think everybody knows that it doesn't matter. Whoever is going to be with Chamisa, the new party, would also be subjected to the same financial incentives that Zanu PF is offering. We are talking of reforms before elections. Chamisa knows that come 2028, for those elections, it doesn't matter even if not even one meaningful reform is in place. It doesn't matter even if we've got all the evidence that the same voters' roll is going to be used, i.e., one where nobody knew who was on the voters' roll. The same practices where people are frog marched to go and attend Zanu PF rallies and then vote for Zanu PF. It doesn't matter. We can be assured that the opposition will be participating in those elections in their numbers, because they also know that if you win the few gravy train seats that Zanu PF is offering to entice the opposition to participate, you will get yourself 60,000 US dollars straight away. 60,000 US dollars to buy a car, and 40,000 housing allowance. And then the salaries and all these allowances, such that it's completely waste of time to say that they should not participate. Comes back to what I was talking about. This is what David Coulthard was talking about in his book. This is why the opposition has been participating in these elections. They know that if you participate, you get so much benefits that you yourself, yeah, okay. And for some of this opposition, this is an opportunity of a lifetime. You participate and you win. Those 5 years you're in parliament, you will probably make more money than you could have ever hoped to make the rest of your life. And with a bit of luck, you're set off for life. Besides those benefits of the car, the housing, you also are in for a chance to get a farm. And in a country where ordinary people are not even allowed to have title deeds to a few acres, they are supposed to continue with the communal ownership, which makes them vulnerable to Zanu PF machinations. And that is exactly what Zanu PF wants to do with them. Breaking this system is going to be a real tough, because Zanu PF has got so much money, it can literally buy the opposition leadership to do as it please. And so far, we have seen them do that. The opposition failed to implement even one meaningful reform because they were bribed by Mugabe with the trappings of high office during the GNU. And they've been participating in flawed elections because they were after the same benefits of participating in these flawed elections. That is a problem in itself. But on the other end of the scale is the ordinary people themselves. They are so naive that they can't even see that the opposition is no longer fighting in their corner. Even after 23 years, 5 of which in the GNU, and not even one token reform implemented. This is a hopeless situation. Because if the people themselves do not open their eyes, the opposition has already been playing more like Zanu PF Team B, where you play pretending that you are a genuine opposition, whereas in reality you are playing to give Team A legitimacy, to make sure that they win and they get legitimacy. There is no hope of change unless the people themselves change. The opposition, I don't see them. There's no incentive for them to change. They are quite happy with the arrangement. This is a cozy arrangement. The few opposition leaders who won in last year's elections, yes, some of them have been recalled, and unfortunately, because of the infighting, they did not get the benefits that they'd hoped for. But those who are costing up to Chamisa are hoping that their turn will come again. And hopefully, this time they will have a chance to get something. The opposition leadership, as it's presently constituted, they know that the election process is flawed. They will participate knowing fully well that by participating they're giving Zanu PF legitimacy. But they continue participating out of greed, as David Coulthard was saying there in that quotation. It's for the people to open their eyes and realize that the opposition is no longer fighting in the poor's corner. They are now fighting in Zanu PF's corner and pretending that they are fighting in poor's corner. It's tragic that after 43 years of independence, we still can't open our eyes to see the reality. 43 years after independence, we still can't hold free, fair, and credible elections. Very sad. Very, very sad indeed. But until we open our eyes, nothing is going to change. This is a sad point to finish this discussion, but it is the honest truth. The call is for ordinary people there to open their eyes, particularly the intelligentsia. Personally, I am absolutely shocked at the way Zimbabwe's so-called intelligentsia have let the nation down. Thank you very much for listening, and